Good morning, students. Today we are going to talk about video tracking. In this lecture, we will cover MDNets, multi-domain networks, and GoTern, generic object tracking using regression networks. So let's start. Here is the source of the material and slide credits to prepare this lecture. And now let's move to the agenda. We are going to talk about object tracking. What is object tracking models? How many components we have in tracking algorithms, and when we are talking about the tracking models, today we will talk about multi-domain network and GoTern. After these two models, we will talk about the common problems. These problems are already known to you guys, but we will recap them, and finally I will summarize today's lecture. So when we are talking about the object tracking, the goal is to track the object inside the video sequences. And if we consider object tracking, so it is one of the old and hardest problem in computer vision. And there are various techniques and algorithms exist to solve this problem, and solving this problem through different ways. And one of the very popular method is visual appearance based models, but in this lecture we will have some introduction to motion based model, and then we will go into the deeper detail of visual appearance based models. When we are talking about the motion based model, the name specifies like these models are based on motion. It can capture the dynamic behavior of the object. It can predict the potential position of the objects in the future frames. But the drawback of motion-based model is that it can fail in certain scenarios. For example, the object is not present in the video, or abrupt direction changes, or speed change. Abrupt direction change means that like if an object is moving and it take 180-degree like turn, so this is abrupt direction change. And similarly speed change, and for example moving object change its speed, so potential position of the object in the future frame is very challenging in motion based model. If we want to look at this motion based model, what kind of techniques it is, so we can have optical flow, Kalman filtering, KLT feature tracker, mean shift, and many more. These motion based model are also present in OpenCV, so you can also check these trackers if you want to go with the classical computer vision method for object tracking. In case of visual appearance based model, so we need to understand the appearance of the model, appearance of the object, and here the technique is to learn the discriminative power of the object from the background. So here like we can track the objects in a way like single object tracker or multiple object trackers. But today we are going to focus only on single object tracker. If you are interested into the topic, maybe you can check multiple object trackers based on your own interest. So here is the example of single object tracking, a football, and how object tracker is tracking this football. And the next example is multiple object tracking, where we are we are tracking the objects, but not single but multiple objects in the video frames. And how now let's move towards the visual appearance based model components. So the very first component is target initialization. In target initialization, we need to initialize the state of the target by drawing a bounding box around it. It means that like if you are going to track any object inside the video sequence, what we need to do, we need to first draw a bounding box around the object. So it's not necessary that human need to draw this bounding box. It is also possible like some automatic system can draw this bounding box. For example, if you want to track some of the objects inside the video, consider the example of CCTV. Let's say CCTV is monitoring a real time traffic, and automobiles are moving in a like specified speed. But for example, if there is a change in speed of certain vehicle, then you want to track this car, then like you can draw this bounding box using some automated way, and then this car is going to be tracked in the future frames. So this is target initialization. And next part is, and the next component is appearance modeling. So now we learn the visual appearance of the object by using learning techniques. So here, like when we are doing this appearance modeling, most of the time visual appearance is learned using convolutional neural network. And today we are going to talk about multi-domain networks and GOTERN. Both of these models are based on CNN. The reason is that why CNN is so powerful in most of the applications, because this is a discriminative model, and we can have this discriminative power to distinguish between the object and the background in case of object tracking. So here, like when we are going to learn these appearances, then the next step is to estimate the motion. So motion estimation is not like measuring the speed, but motion estimation means that we need to predict a zone where the target is most likely to be present in the subsequent frames. For example, if this is your object, then what is the probability that object will move in any direction? So we need to estimate that position, and finally we need to lock down the exact position. For example, your object is moving in this direction, so you need to lock down this target position. So we have four components of our visual appearance based object tracking models. And now okay, before going to the next part, like what is MDNet, we have a last statement here. Generally a tracking algorithm don't try to learn all the variations of the object. So if you pay attention, like the algorithm don't try to learn all the variations of the object. So here the reason is that we are not going to detect the object, like what kind of object it is, but what we are interested in just to track the object, whatever the object is. It can be human, it can be football, it can be any car, any object. Okay, so let's move to our first CNN based online tracking and online tracker or tracking algorithm. So multi-domain network. This is a paper published in CVPR 2016, written by Postech, South Korea. These guys already participated in Vote Challenge. Maybe some of you guys are familiar with Vote Challenge, visual appearance object tracking vote, like visual object tracking challenge, and they were the winner of this challenge. And later they write this paper, multi-domain network, and this paper is published in CVPR. You can find the paper on arXiv, as well as you can find their GitHub, very organized code, and you can see how they implement their MDNet. So what was the motivation behind this MDNet? They were considering three problems that actually motivate them to bring this MDNet. The first problem they consider is the pre-trained models. The second one is multi-domain problem. And the third one is the network size problem. So here, let's consider the first, what is the pre-trained problem. So most of the time when we are using this transfer learning, and here is the problem, like okay, this is the problem in some cases, but in some cases it is not the problem. Let me say, when we are using the pre-trained model, and if the domain is same, then you can use transfer learning mechanism, and it can reduce the computational cost and the time to train the model, and then it is reasonable to use pre-trained model. But in case of object tracking, the domain is very different, and you're not going to do some classification or semantic segmentation or object detection. So it is not reasonable to use pre-trained model. So what is the realistic approach? The realistic approach is to train a CNN, convolutional neural network, based on video tracking data. And here, when we are going to track the targets, and targets may be very different, but for example, why the target can be very different. For example, when you're tracking the object can be human, object can be a car, object can be any other entity. So in this case, like we have a lot of different diversity, but keep in mind we have some commonalities, including edge gradients and many other possibilities that we are going to see in the coming slides. And these kind of stuff actually require network learning. So network can learn the edge gradients and the corners, for example, whatever the information that we have inside the object. So here, this is more realistic approach, that we are not going to use any pre-trained model, but we can train the model with a video tracking data. And when we are going to train with the video tracking data. Problem is, like, we have a very diverse types of objects, but reality is, at the very bottom line, we have edge gradients, some kind of lines, and some other features which are common in object moving stuff. The second problem that they identify, and then they were motivated to work on MDNet, is multi-domain problem. So here it is more difficult to train CNN directly with the tracking data. The reason is that if you have different domains, so target in one video can be a background in another video. For example, let me give you an example. This is a video frame where you have like this human. You want to track this human in another. Okay. And here is a car. So object of interest is the human. But for example, another video where you have like the human and the car, but now you are going to target your object, this car. So this kind of changes actually make the situation more difficult. And similarly, some additional challenges include background clutter, occlusions, elimination variations, and so on. So we are pretty much familiar like what kind of challenges we have in computer vision. The third main problem that they deal in MDNet is the network size problem. This is very natural. For example, when you are using CNN network for detection, classification, and segmentation, so usually the output is very large. In a sense, for example, consider the semantic segmentation. That was the topic for the previous lecture, and you can like see we are going to have each pixel classification. And if you are considering, for example, ImageNet, so we have a lot of classes that we need to classify. But in case of object tracking, we have only two categories. One is the target and the second is the background. Why just two labels? The reason is that in the image, if this is your target, everything else you will consider it as a background. So let's move on and see MDNet architecture. In this architecture actually corresponds to a part of the VGG-M network, and we have different kind of networks, for example, ResNet, AlexNet, Inception, so and so forth. And similarly, we have VGG-M network. If you want to go into more details, I just keep this paper here. This paper is written by Oxford University researcher and pretty much straightforward to read it. But it's not necessary. This is just for the source of reference. But here I am going to explain how they are using this VGG-M network in their MDNet architecture. So here we have the input at 3 at 107 into 107, size of the video frame, and 3 means like we have a color image or color frame. Then we have like convolution layer 1, 2, 3, and we have these fully connected layers, and finally we have domain specific layer. And here in each layer, why this 2 means that either we have a background or we have the target tracking object. Now they have very nice idea like how they are going to make this network which actually have the shared layers, right? This is the shared layers. Let's move and see how they are going to work. The reason is like we have the different domains. I can say let's go back. For example, look at this domain, something maybe I can see this is something on the road, this is something that are going to track near the trees, and again outdoor with the railway line, and this is indoor environment, maybe in the classroom or hallway or some other environment. So now when they are going to train their network, how they are going to train this one? So before going to the training, they are using HingLAS for MDNet as a loss function. So here they are using stochastic gradient descent method for the training, and each domain is handled exclusively in each iteration. And before I want to put this as a bullets, then it takes a lot of space and not that much clear. Then I took this from the original paper. When I was reading this paper, I put some highlights, and then we can see how we have this information. So here when you are training your when you are training MDNet, so here the essence is they bring some mini batch from this domain, and then they train this network, and then in another iteration they bring another mini batch and train this network, and similarly for all the videos. So if they are going to do this kind of training, so what will be the impact of this mechanism? Any thought, any idea that you can consider or say like this is why we have this kind of situation? Okay, so let me explain. If you get the point, because this is online lecture, if you already get the point, then it is fine. If not, then I am going to explain it a little bit in more details. So here when you bring this domain and you train this network, actually they are sharing weights. So you will capture some of the information from this mini batch, then from this mini batch, and then from this mini batch. And finally, you have the information mostly from different domains, and this information is here with the shared layers. Now that part is offline training. In MDNet we also have online training as well as tracking. So after completion of the training, what we are going to do, just drop this final layer, and when you will drop this domain specific layers, what you are going to do, you are going to have these shared layers, and then you put another layer that is domain specific layer with just two outputs, like background or the object. So here they fine-tune this new domain specific layer and the fully connected layers in the shared network in online setting. So this is going to be fine-tuned when they are going to predict the places where object is, and then they actually log the location. So now during the online training, what they are going to do, the tracking procedure is explained or divided into three parts: tracking, control, and network updates, because now you bring a new domain. So what we need to do, we need to update the network, but not all the network, just fully connected layers, and then we will see how it will work. Hard mini batch mining, so we are using stochastic gradient descent, and this is not good for such kind of situation where you have few negative training examples are very trivial one. I'm going to explain like what is hard mini batch mining, and maybe some of the students already know and they use in their semester project, and this is one of the very nice way to get more nicer discriminative power in our convolutional neural network. And third is the bounding box regression. So first let's see tracking, control, and network updates. Here authors considers two complementary aspects in visual tracking: robustness and adaptiveness, and they maintain the robustness and adaptiveness by long-term and short-term updates. What is long-term updates? Long-term updates are performed in regular intervals using positive samples collected for a long period. So they collected the positive samples, and then they are going to update their network with this regular network update. And the second one is short-term updates. Short-term updates are conducted whenever potential tracking failures are detected. So if like you bring a new domain to your MDNet and it is going to fail with the probability or the threshold of 0.5, so it means MDNet is going to give you a very random tracking. In this case you need to do short updates, and these short updates actually bringing to the model in a way that your tracker is going to track your object more nicely in the future frames. So we will see how we can make this. And then when we are going to do this long-term and short-term updates, how we can get the positive or the negative examples to update our model. So here, to estimate the target state in each frame, and target candidates are sampled around the previous target state, and they are evaluated using the network. And if a network classify them correctly, then you can say like this is positive examples, and with the negative scores you will consider it as a negative example for the network. And then you can find the maximum positive score like this and consider this the positive training examples, and you can update your network. This is equation number 1. We use this equation somewhere in the coming slides. Just remember, this is your maximum positive example based on positive score of the network. The second thing is hard mini batch mining. So majority here is the essence, like why we start this hard mini batch mining, at what kind of problems it can solve for discriminative power of your convolutional neural network. So when we are considering the negative examples, so typically they are trivial, are redundant in tracking approaches, while only few negative samples are effective to a training the classifier. So now a very natural question is coming into our mind, like what kind of negative examples are trivial, are redundant, and how we can distinguish like which negative training examples are effective for the training. So here let me explain this point, and then I am going towards hard mini batch mining. Ordinary stochastic gradient descent method, when we are using this for the network convergence, so the training samples evenly contribute to the learning. It means that in SGD we are giving equal weight to the positive and negative training examples. But in case of negative training examples, because they are redundant, so you don't have enough samples to show to your network like how it is going to behave. So this kind of situation is known as drift problem, and we can solve this problem using hard negative mining. And similar kind of stuff is also very hot topic in the research area. And after 2 years, when they published this paper, there is another paper in CVPR, hard examples mining with auxiliary embeddings. If you are interested, so maybe you can check this paper as well. So now when we are talking about hard negative mining, I put another slide in the appendix as well. If you couldn't get like the clear idea what it means, then you can also refer to appendix slide. But I will try my best to explain it in a way that it can be nicely digest during the lecture. So here, this is our, pay attention, like this is our object that we are going to track, and all these blue bounding boxes are negative training examples. But now, like if you will consider these training examples, negative training examples, so most of the time they are redundant, okay, and these are not really useful. The reason is that because your tracker needs to have object here, so most of the time, like if let me say for example predict something here but it is wrong, then you have a lot of false positive examples. Pay attention, if you have a lot of false positive examples, then it means that you can also use it as a negative training examples, which means with the passage of time you will have a very good discriminative power in your convolutional neural network to have ability to track your object in a very like nicer way. So here, for example, in the start you consider a few examples that is close to this as a false positive rate, and then like again you have such a kind of information. Then with the passage of time, did you see like after 30th mini batch, hard negative mining is not like something like this where you have a lot of negative examples, but here you have the negative examples but very useful. So these are more close to the other persons, but this is your tracker which is required to track in this video frame. And similarly here, I just make the things a little bit like messy to explain. I'm not going to write anything here, but I can say, you can see like in the first mini batch, this is your object that you want to track. After fifth mini batch, like most of the things are here, and now most of the things are here. So these kind of false positive give more nicer intuition to train the empty net, and this was the very nice idea to get rid of the false positive examples. And the next one is the bounding box regression. Due to a high level abstraction of CNN based features, data augmentation is a strategy which samples multiple positive examples around the target. MDNet sometimes fail to find the tight bounding boxes enclosing the target, and now like what they did, they bring a regression layer after some convolution layer to make it more nicer tight bounding box around the object. So here is the detail. They didn't provide a lot of detail to formulate this one, but the idea is like, given the first frame of the test sequence, we train a simple linear regression model to predict the precise target location using convolution 3 features. So in their network, after convolution 3 features, they are going to put a simple linear regression layer, and then they are going to get this bounding box. And here they explain like how they can get it nicely, but most of the details are here in the paper. If you are interested to see more engineering details, like how they are bringing this regression layers to their network, and their training in a way that we can have this one, so you can also go to the paper number 12 in the original paper. So here they performed experiments on object tracking, benchmark, and visual object tracking, and they have very good results as compared to the previous developed techniques. Okay.